Hello, this is Mario Farina. Today I'll be reading a story to you entitled Time Travel Visit to Schenectady. The story has this picture at the front. It's available in Smashwords, www.smashwords.com. Available free for reading and for downloading. While there you will see many other stories that are free for reading and for downloading. You're welcome to take any of them you wish. Time Travel Visit to Schenectady. I don't know exactly how to begin this tale. In a sense, it's not a story, but a recitation of something that actually happened. At least, I think it happened. I'm 93, a widower, and live alone. I was having dinner at a local diner, the Daily Sunrise in Troy, New York. I ate there virtually every day, and in a way, it was the only period of recreation that I allowed myself. I was retired and didn't do a great deal during the day, except attend to finances and at times write a story. Some days my writings went well, at other times they didn't. But I did the best I could. I was having sausage and eggs, though it was not breakfast time. This was a meal I enjoyed very much, and I would order frequently without regard to the time of day. A man approached the booth where I was sitting. I merely glanced at him since I didn't think he was coming to see me. He was a large person, middle-aged, rough face, very light gray hair, wearing a blue suit and nondescript tie. He looked vaguely familiar. Without any introductory remarks, he said to me, "Pardon me, sir, are you having any huckleberries with that meal?" The conversation ended at that instant. Also the meal. Also my presence at the Daily Sunrise. Instantly, I found myself in Schenectady. Schenectady, New York, was a place that I knew well, since I had been born there in 1923. I recognized it at once and noted that the street I was on was State Street, in the business area. I was on the south side where Proctor's Theater was, and is still located. Looking west toward Scotia, I could see the railroad bridge that crossed State Street. I didn't know what time it was, but felt it was well within the time when businesses and organizations providing services were open. I think it was sometime in the afternoon. To say that I was amazed and surprised would be enormously understating the way I felt. What was it that had actually happened? Was I dreaming or hallucinating? Had I suddenly become insane? Nothing of what I found myself in made sense. For several seconds I stood motionless, allowing my brain to catch up to the event that had just transpired. It was like I had just stubbed my toe and was awaiting the pain I knew would arrive in a second or two. The autos on the street were old. I guessed that many of them were 36s and 37s. It began creeping into my psyche that I had suddenly been cast into a time period that approximated 1937. My mind was unable to adequately process this information. What should I do? Should I seek the aid of the police? Should I go to a hospital and ask to be mentally evaluated? A muddle of questions were overloading my brain with no understandable answers. I knew where the public library was in 1937. I decided to go there and see if I could glean anything helpful. Walking west on State Street I suddenly realized I was headed in the wrong direction, so made a sudden 180-degree turn. A man walking in the same direction as mine almost ran into me. I recognized him as the man who had come to see me while I was having dinner. He was startled at my sudden turn and immediately spun his attention to a store's show window. On the inside, there were on display several items of women's lacy underwear. I was surprised to see this person. How was it possible for someone belonging in 2017 would be there in 1937? I should have said something to him, but didn't, and kept walking in the direction that would take me to the library. As I walked, I glanced behind me from time to time to see if I could catch sight of the burly man again. What was his part in, if any, in what was happening to me? So many questions there were without answers. If my brain had been a thermometer, the mercury in the little red ball at the top would have burst. The public library was on Seward Street. It took about 10 minutes to get there. I went through the large mahogany door as I had done many times in my childhood. Inside, the place looked exactly the same as I remembered it. This convinced me that I was indeed in another age, in another time. The book checkout counter was on the left of the hallway, as it had always been. I glanced toward the shelves and the racks. There were no differences from my recollections. I looked for the children's section, which was the section that I gravitated to as a child, and went there. I began looking at some of the books. I saw a book that I remembered from my childhood. It was a bright red book entitled Poppy Out and the Tittering Totem by Leo Edwards. This had been one of my favorites. After a few minutes, I left the section, inadvertently carrying the book with me. As I climbed the stairs to the second level, where there were books dealing with general nonfiction topics, I was hoping to see something that would explain the sudden turn of events that had occurred. There was nothing, and I decided to discontinue my futile search. I thought it might be the time to take a different course of action, like visiting Ellis Hospital. If my brain was playing a game with me, I should find out what the rules were. I was walking toward the exit when a young dark-haired woman from the checkout desk signaled me that I needed to stop there first. Oh yes, Poppy Out. I stopped and told her that I wanted to check out the book. She looked for my library card. I told her that I knew I had a card but didn't have it with me. She said she'd look up my record. The woman asked my name and looked through the card file until she found a card, and she said, I have a card here with the name Roger Gordon, but it says this card was made out to a student 2 years ago. Are you the person that applied for this card? I said I was. She asked, are you a student, sir? I told her no, but that this was definitely my card. I knew I had puzzled her greatly when I added that I had made out the card many years ago when I was a student. Her face took on the appearance of a person being asked a question in an unknown language. This card was made out in 1935, she says. It states that it was made out to a student. Forgive me, sir, but you look as if you haven't been a student for a long time. Her own age couldn't have been more than 18, but she spoke with the logic of a judge. Do you have any identification, she asked. I pulled my wallet from my back pocket and handed her my driver's license and a Discover card. She stared at the documents, then, with no explanation, went into another room, leaving the door open. I could see that she was using the telephone. I knew that she was calling someone about me, but I didn't mind. I knew that if someone came, it might be a person who could help me understand what was happening in my life. She came back and said, "It'll be a few minutes, sir, before we can serve you. Do you mind waiting?" I said no. She stepped back and waited while the young woman attended to other persons. After about 10 minutes, a police officer arrived. He was middle-aged and kindly looking. There were no weapons visible. He spoke to the woman for a few seconds, took my driver's license and credit card from her, looked at them for a minute, then approached me and said, "I'm Officer Jenkins. Are you Mr. Gordon?" I responded that I was. He spoke politely. "Do you want to check out the book that you have in your hand and want to use a card that does not appear to be your card? The ID items you gave Miss Adams look strange. Can you explain any of this?" "Officer," I responded, "the library card was made out to me many years ago. I thought that was done in 1935. I've lived a long time since then. I'm 93 and live in the age 2017. Today, about 2 hours ago, I was brought back to 1937 by some power that I don't understand. I know this is hard to believe. I don't believe it myself. I need a lot of help in trying to find out what has happened to me. Can you help me?" The officer asked, "Do you mind coming to the station where we can talk about this?" I responded that I didn't. We walked to the officer's police car, parked on the street half a block away. He drove to the police station on J Street. Interestingly, he had invited me to sit next to him on the front seat. At the police station, Officer Jenkins spoke to the officer in charge, who escorted me to a nearby room. The room was barren except for an old wooden desk and 3 plain chairs. He told me to sit and wait. Then he left. The room seemed to be a place where the police interrogated people. A young man dressed in a business suit came in and told me his name was Detective Nelson. He had the library card and my ID documents with him. He asked me to sign my name on a sheet of paper, which I did. He compared what I had written with the documents he had. "I'm convinced you're Mr. Roger Gordon," he said. "Do you believe you are the person on this card and that you are also related to another person who originally used this card?" I said, "Yes, I thought so." Detective Nelson opened a drawer of the desk and pulled out a Schenectady directory. "Do you know the address of the person for whom this card was made?" he asked. I said, "Yes. His home is at 1329 6th Avenue in Mount Pleasant. He lives there with his parents. He is an only child. You can probably find the father's listing by the name Frederick Gordon. I don't know whether they might be at home at this time or not, but it might be a good idea to see if they are." The detective agreed and said that he would send a car to find out if anyone was home. He took me to a plainly furnished waiting room and asked me to sit and wait while until they had further news. While waiting, I browsed through the copy of the papier that I had brought with me. Somehow it was in my possession. I felt I must have brought it back to the present from 1937. About half an hour later, I was escorted back to the interrogation room. There were two people there, one that I recognized as my mother at an age of a long time ago. There was also a young lad, and I felt this must have been me as I looked in 1937. Both individuals seemed puzzled. I didn't know how to deal with the visitors since I believed they would not recognize me. I wanted to exclaim, "Mother," and rush to her with arms outstretched, but resisted the urge, not wanting to cause any complication to the already befuddling situation. The detective asked my mother if she recognized me. She said no. He asked the boy whether he recognized me, and the youngster also said no. Then he asked me if I recognized them. I nodded yes. My mother and the boy seemed not to comprehend. Detective Nelson asked me, "Tell me more. What's this about your coming from a time in the future?" I responded, "I believe that I live in another age. I was born in 1923. I don't know what year it is here, but it seems to be 1937. I don't know how I got here." He confirmed that it was 1937. I asked what was the date and time. He told me that it was June 11 and the time was 4:15. The date was consistent with the date during which I had been having dinner a short time before. The time did not exactly match. The door opened and the officer in charge walked in, escorting a burly person whom I recognized as the one who had accosted me when I was having dinner, and then later nearly bumped into me on State Street. The officer faced me and said, "This man states he is your attorney and wants to help you. Do you know him?" I said that I did recognize him. The husky man announced loudly, "Huckleberry Finn are in season." Within the night blink, I found myself back in 2017, having dinner at the same diner that I had left some hours earlier. I saw a man walking out the door of the diner. Otherwise, the scene was exactly the same as it had been when my dinner had been interrupted. The server came to my table and asked if everything was all right. I said yes, and asked who it was that I had just seen exiting the diner. She said the man was Professor Collins, who worked at RPI. She did not know anything more about him than that. She said the professor had been with me for about 20 minutes, and that during that time I had been completely immobile. She had wondered whether I was all right and was happy to see that everything was okay. I agreed that there was nothing wrong, and I found that I could finish my sausage and eggs, though much of the food had become cold. The following day I went to RPI and asked to speak to someone who knew Professor Collins. There was nothing wrong, I said. I simply wanted to learn more about him. I added that he might be able to help me with a problem. Someone did assist me and told me that Collins was a professor of psychology and philosophy, and that he had been doing experiments dealing with intelligence, human behavior, and virtual reality. I thanked the individual and left, determined to speak to Professor Collins. I did reach him the following day and made an appointment to go see him. He said that he would see me at 2 on the following afternoon. When we met, the first words Professor Collins spoke to me constituted an apology for having troubled me with an experiment. He thought that my age was such that I would not be aware of what he was doing, and that he would not need to give me a lengthy explanation, then ask for permission. He had been surprised with the intelligence I had displayed in coping with the sudden events. He hoped I would not make an issue of his actions since they had been intended for the good of humanity. I told him I probably would not go forward with anything. Though I did not remember having met him, he gave me information that I had had an initial contact with him in an evening of entertainment hosted by General Electric a year earlier, whereby the professor had presented an experiment in hypnotism. He had claimed he could hypnotize an entire room at the same time. To those hypnotized, he had left a post-hypnotic suggestion involving the word huckleberries. I remember the occasion, but I felt I had not been hypnotized. It came as a disappointment and a source of pique to learn that I had unwittingly surrendered my mind to this person. He had selected me from an audience because of my age. This had been the epitome of effrontery toward me by this man. I felt I should sue him for something, but didn't know exactly for what. Professor Collins stated that when he uttered the word huckleberries, the word would trigger a post-hypnotic suggestion that would immediately put me under his control. Then he would be able to send me back in time using a special adaptation of virtual reality. Apparently the experiment had worked, and I had gone back to 1937. Though intended to be virtual reality, it had felt utterly real. What I had experienced seemingly over several hours had all occurred within a time frame of only a few minutes. He himself had not been with me at any point, he asserted. Then I remembered the book. I showed Professor Collins the Papillon book. How could I have a material book in my hands, though the experiment had been one of virtual reality? The sight of the book bewildered him. He reluctantly admitted he had no answer. "Give me a moment," he said, more to himself than to me. He closed his eyes and went into a trance-like appearance for several minutes. Finally, he opened his eyes and spoke. "Mr. Gordon," he said, "I conclude you had that book in your possession all along. You could not have gotten it in 1937. There is no other explanation." I was about to controvert his remark when there was a voice from the intercom. "Professor, there's a woman here with a letter, and they demand for money." "Send her in." The door opened and a woman in postal uniform entered. She presented a battered envelope to Professor Collins. "Professor," she said, this envelope was mailed to you in June 1937. On behalf of the Postal Service, we apologize for its condition and the delay in its delivery. There is only a 3-cent stamp on it. I've been instructed to collect 95 cents postage due, but I have the authority to personally waive the fee. As a courtesy to you and to the school, I will do so." Then she left. Professor Collins examined the envelope and its postmark, then opened the envelope. He pulled out a small, plain-looking piece of paper with a bit of handwriting on it. He studied the paper and appeared stunned. He handed it to me. It was a receipt made out to the professor by the Acme Bonding Company. It was a receipt for $100 bail money for the release from jail of one Roger Gordon. You were right, Mr. Gordon," he said as he spoke to me. "It wasn't virtual reality after all. You actually were in 1937, and I was there with you. That's the end of the story. I hope you liked it. Tomorrow I'll have another story for you. Thanks for looking. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.